Okay, so this machine unfortunately is very deceptive. It seems like such a itty bitty little blade right there, but I found that I've had some of my worst injuries with this, and it's usually because people tend to not think about it as dangerously as it is, and they're pushing their project in and suddenly their project disappears and they end up running their fingers right into it. So I'm going to give you a whole bunch of hints and tricks how to stay away from that. Start with, this is called a router, R-O-U-T-E-R. Proper name, principal name is a router, R-O-U-T-E-R. The size, we have a couple different sizes. The motor is one thing that has sizes, and the bit is a different. So right here we have a motor that's connected directly to a blade, and then the blade has different sizes on it. So we have a different shank size, actually. I know that's going to give off a lot of humor here. But if I open this up, wait for it, I can take out this bit. And this one has a 1/2 inch, call it, and the other one, the other size is a 1/4 inch. So if you want to write that down for size, 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch. 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch is the collet size or the shank size on this. And we have a whole bunch of different bits. The router is specifically for shaping your project. So what's the first one on there? Oh, type of drive, we talked about that. The bit was connected directly to this, so it's direct drive. Principal use is in routering. I know that sounds kind of corny, but we haven't talked about it. So principal use is in routering. Secondary use is shaping or forming. So if you can visualize your kitchen cabinets at home, all your cabinets pretty much have a little tiny router around the outside edge of it. And those little kind of funny little detail things that make them look pretty, those are done with a machine like this. And so we have a whole bunch of different bits. We have a bit that will leave a little tiny cool profile detail on the very edge of your board. We have bits that will take off a whole bunch of material. And the bit we're going to be using is called a roundover bit, and it's got an 1/8 inch that it rounds over. So we're going to take the corner of our sharp helicopter and we're going to cut it so it gets this little round profile right on the edge. So when you pick it up, it feels nice and smooth all the way around. So we're going to do a roundover bit on ours. So I'm going to put this bit in here. Notice how I have it unplugged when I'm doing this, obviously. One of the worst injuries that can happen, and that did happen, well, actually, it actually wasn't a student. It was a janitor, custodian that was working, cleaning up the shop, and there was one of these sitting on a table, and he picked it up, and he kind of moved back. Well, the cord jerked, and it turned on, and when it kicked on, it flipped out of his hand, and he went to move backwards, and there was a wall behind him, and it just came down, and it just completely lacerated his whole hand all the way open. He had this wicked looking scar. It was great in the middle of class. We got to show everybody wicked. Yeah, it was wicked cool. Okay, we're going to put this roundover bit in, and I'm not going to have you guys mess with how to set it for height and everything, but I'm just going to show you. I slide the collet in and I leave about a 1/2 inch between the blade and the actual net. And now I'm going to tighten this up, hopefully. I have a lot of students that act like Rambo when we're doing this. It doesn't actually take a lot of work to tighten that. If you really wrench it on there, nobody can ever get it back off afterwards. So make sure you're nice and gentle with that. Then I'm going to put the table back, or the table back on. And when I do this, this is actually what adjusts the height, and that is what this threading action is what adjusts the height. And usually this is hanging and you adjust the router underneath, and that adjusts the tabletop and how much I'm going to cut. So I can set it for right there, and that lets me. And I'm not going to set it for something important right now because we're going to do a demonstration on this. Notice how the on button is a toggle switch underneath. On button is a toggle underneath, toggle switch underneath. And that's important because once you put it into the tabletop here, notice how it's pointing this way. And if I flip it around, now it's pointing this way. I have a lot of students put it in this way, and then they're trying to fondle all around down here, and it looks really awkward and everything as they try and find that on button. So sometimes it's best to turn it so that it's facing where you are instead of that cool action that looks all weird. So, what are we on? Which one's next? Safety precautions? No. Built-in safety features. What's the first one you see there? Do what? Table. Table is a built-in safety feature. What's the next one? That's it. And that's why it's so dangerous. You don't have any other built-in safety features. On that orange router table down there, you see that fence that goes behind it? Sometimes you'll have a fence, so you can write that on there. Built-in safety feature would be a fence. But oftentimes, like this, because of the nature of the project that we're doing, we don't get any other safety features. We don't get any fences or anything because we're going to be wrapping this around our whole project. All right. Safety cautions while operating. First one. Safety glasses. Next one. You guys may or may not be able to see this, but do you see this cool writing that's on it? It says push and it has a direction. That is the way that you push your project. It's amazing. So, what you're going to write in your notebook is push against the bit. Push against the bit direction. And I'll explain what that means in just a second. We're going to do a demo. It may become violent. I apologize. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wake you up a little bit and scare you on how not to use this machine and how dangerous it can be and why you can lose your fingertips. And then I'll tell you a cool story. So I'm going to turn it on and I'm going to push this in there and we're going to see which direction it flies. I apologize if any of you get tagged unceremoniously. So that piece was pretty good size, about the same size your helicopter is going to be. And if you're not holding onto it tight, it goes wham! And then if you're still pushing in a little bit, then you end up doing it. It's cool actually. There's this bright mist. It's like this. It's like this little magic show, and this big red mist kind of encircles you, and you're like, oh, that's me. And it's kind of disgusting. When you are doing this, first thing you need to be aware of is your fingers are going to be the thing that's going to get lacerated most. And the good news is you probably can't kill yourself on this. Even if you get your head down there and move it around while it's cutting, you're probably not going to, you're going to screw something up kind of bad, but it's not going to kill you, likely. So, 2 reasons why that flew. One is because my height was not correct. So my height was up too far and it was hogging a lot more material than it should be, and I specifically set it that way so we could do this demonstration. So now I'm going to adjust it down to the height it should be at, which brings us to our second thing to write down on safety precautions while operating. Always use a test piece first. Always use a test piece first. And I'll explain what that means. Always use a test piece first. So this is great. If you're going to be routering out your helicopter or any other project, you put it down here and you're about to put your helicopter in there and then you're like, wait a second. I need to use a test piece. And so you grab Billy's project because Billy didn't need it right then. And you're going to say, Billy, I'm going to do yours first because I really like you. And then you router his and you're like, wow, that's at the total wrong height. And then you can adjust it for the right height. And Billy shouldn't have let you use his piece. So we're going to put it in here and we're going to test and see if it's at the right height first. So I'm going to push this direction, I'm going to turn it on, and the fourth thing you're going to write down, fingers on top of your project. Always have your fingers on top of your project. And this is somewhat counterintuitive because everybody wants to drape their fingers over the side to hold their project better, right? Because you feel like, oh, I have more control when I run my fingers over the side. But if you run your fingers over the side and this grabs it and it spins, what's it going to hit?
The fingers.
Yeah. That's why you always let Billy go first. And so it's going to grab it and rotate it, and it's going to yank your fingers into that. And we'll talk about the reason why that's going to happen in just a second. So if my finger's on top and it twirls, my fingers are still okay. So we're going to do a little bit. See how sharp this edge is right here? We've got this nice 90-degree edge. Now we're going to run it through here. So what's happening is there's a bearing on the top of that. And the bearing will not allow me to cut any more material than the actual cutter head. So if I push it in there, it hits the bearing. And I've already cut this whole corner off, so I'm not going to cut anymore. It hits that bearing, doesn't allow me to cut anymore. So I can run it around my project 40 times, it's not going to cut any more material. And that's really nice because some people are very scared and they stand over here like this, and that's a bad way to do it. And they run it and they're like, well, I didn't hit anything, what do I do? Oh, I just run it through again, no problem. So now we have this nice beveled corner on there. It's all curved and soft, and people walk around going like this. Question?
Is there any way to tell if it's at the right height without
Yes, I am glad you asked. So, how do we know if it's at the right height? If it's not at the right height, this is a complete 90-degree curve. You should see all of that curve. If it's at the wrong height, you'll see a line in your or Billy's project. So you'll see a line all the way down there, and you're like, wow, that doesn't look like it's at the right height. Should we do a demo? We should do a demo. Let's raise it up just a little bit and see what that looks like when you do a bad project. It does look kind of cool. It's not the coolness we're looking on this project for, but it's got this extra line up there that's kind of wicked deep.
Looks like it would be on the cabinets of the 70s.
Yes, that's exactly right. If you had the cabinets from the 70s, this is about the detail profile you'd see on the edge of your cabinets. Now you can go home and tell your mom, hey, I could make that. And she'd be like, oh, can you? How about let's do this all on an island? You're like, I can't make that. Yeah. He didn't teach us that.
Because I got style.
In 70s, it's not your style anymore.
He was kids here.
So, that's what happens when it's at the wrong height. Then you're going to look at Billy and you're going to go, that's cool. And then you're, huh, okay, let's adjust that. So you're going to adjust it back down. So you're going to take this little, by the way, notice it's still on. Is this dangerous? This is very dangerous. So I'm going to take this little nut right here and I'm going to loosen it. And then I'm going to adjust it up just a little bit. And then I'm going to retighten it. And you can come find me if you need to do that, if you're worried about that. Otherwise, if you know what you're looking for, go for it.
We run across the concert with that. Like pointed at people.
So we have routed the edge, and now we're coming over and we're going to turn the corner and we're going to router the next side. But the problem on the next side is the grain is going this way. What do we know about grain and end grain? It'll go, what happens is the end grain is a lot harder. And the material's a lot harder, and so it's going to probably chip a little bit. And the worst thing is when you go around the corner, there is about 3 times as much material when you wrap around the corner because it's hitting all of that corner at the same time as it wraps around. So what happens generally is you get to a corner and it says, ooh, meat, and it rips it right out of your hands as you're pushing this way, and it blam, and you're like, and then you do the whole little musical thing with the water spraying and the red. You know, I don't know if you've been enchanted. Anyway. Okay, so it's going to be bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to do all my edges, and then we're going to come back and do corners. So I want you to write that down. Router your corners last. router your corners last.
What is a round piece?
We're going to talk about that. Are there any corners on a round piece? Good question, John. They're not. So, if something is small and round, do you think this is very safe? Okay, next thing, write down no small objects and no small round objects. I always get the kid who wants to come over here and make a golf ball. And every time, invariably, either I get a heart attack or else he almost cuts himself, or both. So no small objects, no small round objects. Or you can just slash no small round objects. That's bad news. You'll get to right here and you'll start going around, and can I hold it very tightly? No, it's going to leave, and then I'm going to be doing my little magic potion right here. Alright, one of the last things is if I go really slow through here, this is spinning around at some ridiculous speed. I can't remember, it's like 3,200 RPM. I don't know, maybe it's 3,000 RPM. I can't remember, I can read the side of this thing. Anyway, it's really fast. It's really cooking. And if you put this right here while that's really cooking and you just hold it there, what do you think is going to happen?
It's gonna burn it.
It's going to burn it. And you're going to leave a burn mark. So let's do a demo on that. Yeah, it looks kind of cool. People say, oh, you know what, I like that little burnt spot in my wood. And I'm like, nah, you don't. And it's time to file that puppy out. And so they take some sandpaper, and after about 10 minutes, they're like, it's not coming out. Well, yeah, it burned it in there, and it's really hard now. So it's best if you use a file to clean that up. And if your whole helicopter is done like that, you got this detailed burn mark all the way around, you got a lot of filing ahead of you. So instead of that, you have to keep your speed up just a little. Okay? Next thing to write down, keep your speed up just a little. But not too fast. It's a little healthy minimum. If I go really fast, I'm being stupid. So you just want to go not too slow. Maybe that makes more sense. Don't go slow. Whatever you want to write. Don't go slow. You go really slow, it's going to leave a little burn mark and it's going to frustrate you. Okay, last thing we're going to cover before we're going to do a demonstration on this. Last thing is, sometimes if you're doing a straight piece of wood, it will splinter on you. So if I run this through here like you guys are going to do in a little bit, it's spinning around really fast and it's going to grab that chunk and it's going to rip that whole chunk off, that whole side off. It's going to go shook, and you're going to be like, oh, and the whole piece is going to be gone. So what happens is it's grabbing, and it grabs into it, and usually it means this is a little bit dull, but it grabs it and it grabs that end of that grain and it just rips the whole thing up. So we can get away from that by doing little test cuts first. So if I bump along here and I do little spots, then when I come back through and router the whole thing, it will only split the wood up until that next spot where I bumped it in. It'll rip a little bit, and it won't rip the whole thing off. That's a kind of advanced technique. If that doesn't make sense to you, don't worry about it. But I'm going to show you what it looks like anyway. So I'm going to take a piece, and if I was just to run this, this is really hard oak, so it's probably not going to splinter this. But I'm going to show you what I would do. Okay, one little story. My last school I was teaching at, a student was gone for the day. We have 5 students that are not here today. So you need to make sure you're helping me watch for their safety. There was a student not here on the day we went over safety, and the next thing he saw everybody using this and he thought, oh, that's a cute little toy, I can use that. And he grabbed his piece of wood and he draped his hands over the side and he went in there and he went the same direction. Did we talk about that yet? We didn't. So you went the same direction, and what happens is it's spinning this way, and if you're pushing that way, what do you think will happen? Yeah, it's just going to disappear. It's going to go boom. And so he was doing that, and he had his hands draped over the side like this, and he put it in there, and it went boop. And it took off the tip of every one of his fingers. It went psh. And so he walks into the office, and he does the whole Frankenstein thing. He walks in kind of like this. And I don't remember what I was doing. I'm not usually in my office. Anyway, he walks in like this, and he's like, I cut myself. It's like, cut yourself? I mean, he's doing this thing. I'm not sure. I was like, so I reached over and I grabbed his hands and I flipped it around. It goes, it's beautiful. And I'm like, oh, thanks. That's great. And then he saw all the blood and he probably passed out on me. That was cool. So, I'm standing there with all this blood on me and the blood on him, and I told him to put his fingers together like this and push, and that stopped the blood. It was great. No, I didn't do that. I'm kidding. Anyway, so lesson of the story is if you're not there for the safety, don't use the machine, right? If you're not there for the safety, don't use the machine. So any of those 5 students that aren't here, we can go through their names, but make sure they don't use this machine, and I'll obviously get them to go on the safety as soon as they come back. Okay, questions on this project before we get going on the safety checkoff? Any questions? Okay,